For the next part of our infographic, we want to try to calculate something that viewers of the infographic can sort of walk away with as a call to action. We know with this data set that we're only looking at half a year of data for our Kraken coffee stores in Florida. So we want to try to leave them with maybe a goal or something to shoot for the remainder of the year. And granted, this is 6 months worth of data. It's going to be really hard to forecast off of this data because we don't know anything about like prior years of data. We don't of Kraken coffee stores rather. We don't have other years of data or other stores of data that we can sort of compare against. This is a total crapshoot of a forecast. So we're just going to do our best for projecting full 2023 sales just by using average daily sales so far across our 3 different offices. Again, this is just a best guess scenario. Companies, use this kind of stuff all the time because at the end of the day, if you have a sales team or if you have staff, you want to try to give everyone some kind of goal that they can shoot for, even though I will absolutely preface that the kind of forecasting you're about to see for this infographic is nothing like, some of the more robust forecasts that you might see come out of like statistical modeling or that, any data scientists on your future team or in your future company, might have at their disposal. And this isn't intended to be that either. This is intended to be a forecast based off of admittedly incomplete, very green data, but that's why I'm using this strictly as just a forum to sort of teach you a little bit of DAX that you can use on simple data sets like this one, or even on more complex data sets where you have things like seasonality or multiple years of data, or a much larger data set with, multiple stores spanning different areas and different types of customers. But one more thing that I'm going to do here that I didn't do in my tutorial when I was practicing building this infographic is I'm actually going to create a 4th measure table here just to sort of hold on to all of the DAX that we're going to write for this forecasting section, just to sort of keep ourselves organized here. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I will say, whenever you are writing more complex DAX, never try to just, write your DAX on the fly in like a bar chart or a line chart. I'm a huge believer that when you're just learning DAX and you're trying to get more complex DAX calculations to work, dump everything that you're planning to use into a table visual. And that's going to help you understand sort of the problems that you're wrestling with in your DAX as you tackle those problems. So let's start with the first problem that I know I'm going to run into here because of the way that I set up this report. And that is, first, let's go ahead and add total sales here. Total sales is what we're going to be using to create our very rough run rate forecast. And let's go ahead and grab our, let's just grab our transaction date from our date table. I'm going to go ahead and kind of move this over so that it's first. You'll notice that right now, because my transaction date field is a date column, I'm getting the full date hierarchy from Power BI. That's fine. I don't want it, but it's easy to fix. I'm just going to click on this down arrow here. Let's go ahead and change this from date hierarchy to transaction date. And I also don't prefer to have the full written out text. It's a little bit harder to scan when I'm teaching. So let's go ahead and click on this again and change our date formatting from this long date format to short date format, which I just find a little bit easier to read through. Now, the first problem that we're going to run into here is I want to ultimately create, and I'm actually going to build it over here just to demonstrate my problem. Ultimately, I want to have a line chart that shows my accumulated sales and projects into the future or into December of 2023 where I want to end the year. However, I only have January through June in my entire date table here. So I'm going to create a new date table using DAX, again, just for practice. And in this date table, I'm going to make sure that I have all of the dates that I need in my year of 2023. So I'm going to create a DAX table here. And again, a lot of people, I think, when they're just learning DAX, they think DAX is just measures, it's just calculations. There's not necessarily as much conversation when you're just learning DAX about making calculated fields from DAX, where you're adding columns to your data, or making entire tables just using DAX. And one of the easiest tables that you can make in DAX, I'm just going to call this forecast date table. One of the easiest tables that you can make using DAX uses the calendar function. And we're just going to create a new calendar table. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a list of all dates running between January 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2023. And when I commit this forecast date table, I'm going to see over here on the far right, under my data, there's my forecast date table. Let's just pop over there and take a very, very quick look at it. You can see I've now got a table that contains all of my dates running all the way down. I've got a gap here, but it doesn't look like it's real. I'm seeing 365 rows, which is what it should be. But you can see that I've got all of my dates inclusive for 2023 from January 1st all the way to December 31st. Something else that I want to make sure that I add to this table, and let's see if I can just use my date table. Actually, I don't want to do that because it's not going to contain all of my months since that date table is incomplete. Let's just go ahead and add a month num column over here, and I'm just going to use the month function. And I'm going to point this at my new forecast date. And that's going to give me, 1 for January, 2 for February, 3 for March, standard stuff that I know I'm going to need. And the other thing that I'm going to add to this, I'm actually going to copy and paste directly out of my practice version over here on my other screen. This is just a simple month short expression, very similar to what we built previously, except I'm going to need to make sure I update my table reference. This is just a basic if statement saying, hey, if the number that represents the month is 1, return Jan. If the number that represents the month is 2, return Feb, 3, March, 4th, April. You get how this works. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, and that's going to be my new month short column. While I'm here, if I want to, I can even go ahead and take care of the whole sorting of my month situation, because if you'll recall earlier I said if you just build a month num and a month short column, all of your months are going to be sorted alphabetically. You're almost always going to see April first, and that's how you'll know that something isn't working. Let's go ahead and pop over to month short, hop up here to our sorting button, and tell Power BI that we want to sort month short by month num. And now we should be able to, let's just copy and paste our line chart here, make sure that it's working. We should see all of our months in the proper order. Of course, now you'll also know that my total sales is just the straight line for every single month at $698,812. Maybe you were expecting to have it look like this, but just break off here at June. Well, the problem with that is, if we go over here to our model viewer, you'll notice our forecast date table's hanging out here on the very far right. It's totally lonely, and it's also not connected to our data at all. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to pop over to my data model. I'm going to drag my date onto transaction date. And now you can see I've got a one-to-one relationship because both of these tables contain date level information. So there's only one value for each date in both tables. But now when I head back over here, notice that we've got Jan, Feb, March, April, May, June. These two visuals now look identical. And one thing that you might be thinking now is, well, Sean, if we're using month short from our forecast date table, what happened to July, August, September, October, November, December? Where are those other months that we're missing? This is just another kind of, sometimes annoying nuance of Power BI. Power BI is always going to default on showing you only the values where there are data. If there are months that don't have any data, Power BI is thinking, you must not need to see those months. We do, just in this specific case. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our x-axis. We're going to tell Power BI, hey, show me items that don't have any data. Now you can see I've got July, August, September, October, November, December appearing in this chart. They just don't have any actual data flowing into them just yet. Now let's go ahead and turn our attention back to actually calculating our forecasted values. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is, because our forecast date table is what we're going to actually use for our calculation, let's go ahead and just scrap transaction date. And I'm going to replace that column with my brand new forecast table date. I'm also just going to quickly pop up here and let's format this back to short date. Okay, now let's go ahead and create our first measure that's going to be a part of our forecast. And for this, we're going to want to calculate average daily sales. And I'm going to introduce you to a new type of DAX function. And this is not simply average, like we may have demonstrated with average order size. We're going to instead use average X. And there's a whole family of X functions, as I call them. You have sum X, average X, product X. There's literally tons of these things. And you use these X functions when basically you want to take a particular aggregation like average or sum or something of that nature, and you want to apply that to across the individual values of a field in your data set based on another expression that you've already written. So in this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to try to take the all of the values here in my date column, and I want to average total sales. So what it's going to do is, first, Power BI is going to check all of these values that you see over here on the left that I'm hovering over. And then Power BI is going to look for the average across all of these forecast date values. And you can see I end up with 3,860.84, which is spot on. That's I believe that's exactly right. It looks right to me. I see a lot of 2000s up here and then some 3000s, but I'm expecting that number to be a little bit higher because you can see how much sales are really taking off, from around March, April, May to June. So sales are really increasing. That's why, even though these values look a little bit lower, my average daily sales is quite higher come the end of the year. So let's just go ahead and format this. I'm going to go ahead and make these dollars. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these weird long decimal places. And now we've got our overall average daily sales number. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create another version of this exact same measure. But what I want to do is, you'll notice that right now my average daily sales is exactly the same as my daily sales for any given date up here. Right now, my average daily sales is only right down here in the total. So let's just go ahead and hide column 1 and create our forecast measure table. I'm going to create a new measure here. And you don't have to get too extravagant with your naming here. We'll just call this average daily sales 2. And I'm going to say calculate average daily sales for all selected forecast date table. Now you'll notice that I'm getting that 3,860.84 cents for everything in my forecast table. That value now runs all the way down the table, even ending at December 31st, 2023. That is what I was hoping to do. Let me go ahead and give the date field a little bit more room so that it's not cut off. And granted, this measure may not look like it's particularly helpful, just having the same number replicate over and over and over again all the way down the table. But that's not true. That is actually exactly the performance that I was hoping at this point in my forecast, because now I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new measure, and I'm going to call this average daily sales switch. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say switch on the following condition being true. If my total sales is not blank, then just give me total sales. Otherwise, I want to return that average daily sales to value that I just created. What this is going to do is it is going to basically tell Power BI if we already have sales on a given day, that's fine. That means that that day is in the past, and I want to use those values. However, if those days are not blank, then I just want to use the average daily sales that we have over here, or rather if those values are blank. So on July 1st, we're going to switch basically from using our total sales, which are not blank, to using our average daily sales to calculation for all the days that are blank. And when I drag this over here, you'll see exactly what I mean. For all values in the past, we're using real sales, but for all dates in the future, we're basically projecting, based on what we think is going to happen. And again, this is an imperfect way of doing a forecast, right? I mean, after all, we've already said that this $3,860.84 is on the high side compared to how sales were performing in January, February, March. But honestly, this average daily sales might be on the low side compared to how sales have been progressing in, April, May, and June. Now, for all we know, the kinds of growth that we're experiencing in May and June is going to continue through the end of the year. For all we know, right now sales are ticking up, but they're going to decline when we get back into the fall or winter. These are the kinds of things that a company in its very first year of sales may not know, or they may have to wait and see, or maybe they have an educated guess based on the performance of other coffee shops in Florida, maybe based on other Kraken coffee stores around the country. All this remains to be seen. But for now, we're just kind of doing the best that we can do. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a measure that's going to aggregate all of these values every single day. And this is how we're going to get our final end of the year forecast number. So in other words, what this new measure that we're going to write is going to do is it's going to start on January 1st, and it's going to say $2,508.20 in sales. The following day, it's going to return January 1st plus January 2nd. Then the following value is going to be January 1st plus January 2nd plus January 3rd, all the way down through the table. And this is what's called, obviously, a running total. In other words, every single day, we're going to slap onto all previous day's sales, whatever the most recent day of sales is. And so we're just going to call this our forecast measure. And for this, again, we're going to use another x function, just like average x. And we're going to use the values in our forecast date column. And we're going to roll up here our average daily sales switch measure. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and just commit this, knowing that it's not right yet, and that's fine. So what's happening here is you'll notice my value down here, this $1,409,207, that actually looks right to me. However, what you will notice is that on January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, we're still seeing nothing. And in fact, for all of these values here on a daily basis, we're still just seeing the normal average daily sales output that we've become accustomed to seeing. In other words, this still isn't working the way that we want our running total to work, even though just doing sum X across all of our date values worked fine. Our total down here is actually what I was expecting to see. However, in order to get this measure to cooperate correctly at the individual record level, we're going to have to give Power BI additional instructions on how to handle all of these dates and tell it what the behavior of the measure should be every time we move forward, a new day. So we're going to add a new filter function here, and we're going to give it instructions to basically take these rules into account for every single date in our date column of our forecast date table. And we're going to tell it, I want you to basically return a sum for all dates that are less than or equal to whatever the maximum date is that's currently being evaluated. Again, all of this is starting to look a little codey. If you're new to DAX, maybe this is starting to get a little bit scary. Let me just walk you through exactly what we're doing. We're already telling Power BI that we want to sum up average daily sales switch for all of the values in the date column of our forecast date column table. But we're just providing it additional instructions that whatever the maximum date is that's being evaluated, and this, and if I hover on January 12th, 2023, the maximum date being evaluated is January 1st, 2023. If I hover on January 26th, 2023, at this level in the table, the maximum date being evaluated is January 26th. I'm telling Power BI that I want to sum up all values that are less than or equal to January 26th. Now, when I hit enter, notice that as the date incrementally increases, Power BI knows to sum up all values in average daily sales switch that are less than or equal to January 4th or January 9th or January 16th. And that logic's going to hold true even when I get to the values starting July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd, where I don't have any real sales. You'll notice that at this point, since I've run out of real data here, I'm now just adding every single day that $3,860.84. And I should now be able to drag my forecast over here onto the y-axis and see my full forecast for the entire rest of the year. I'm going to go ahead and remove my total sales, and there is my forecasted value for the entire year. Now that we have our full year forecast value, what I want to do is I want to add a data label to this last data point over here. So we're going to create a new measure, and we're going to call this forecast label. Actually, I'm going to call this forecast marker. This isn't really going to be the forecast label. So let's go ahead and call this forecast marker. And you can use any logic that's being evaluated in any visual to your benefit. In other words, we know that this line chart that we're building here contains months: January, February, March, April, all the way through December. We know that the marker that we want to mark, or in other words, the dot that I want to show here, is always going to be December. I'm always just going to want to show this final value here. So let's go ahead and head back to our forecast marker logic. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to say if max month num equals 12, then return forecast. And if it doesn't, just return blank. You can even delete the table name since there's only a measure called forecast. Now, think about what this is doing. It's basically, because what did I just tell you over here about max? Max is going to evaluate on its own for whatever record you're throwing at it. We haven't told max to go and find the maximum value across our entire forecast date table. We've only told it to find the maximum value for month num, and that value for any given record here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 12 for December. And that's why our dot appears over here and only in December, because we're telling Power BI that in order to show anything, we want our max month num to evaluate to 12. If max num is 1, 2, all the way through 11, we want to return blank or nothing. Let's go ahead and see what this would do if, here, let's go ahead and say greater than 10 instead of equal to 12. You might be thinking, okay, maybe I'm going to see a dot here just for October. What we're actually going to see is now we're going to see this line for October, November, and December, because those meet the criteria that's running in the background where the month num has to evaluate to greater than or equal to 10. Notice now we've got a longer kind of forecast line here. We can even say greater than or equal to 7 if we wanted to show the entire forecasted part of the line, which is actually kind of a cool idea now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe I should have done that from the beginning, but oh well. It's not in my preparation materials, so let's just go ahead and change this back to 12. And we're just going to mark this final dot over here at the very end. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a forecast label. Let's go ahead and call this forecast label. And this is just going to be a very similar sort of label to what we've been building so far. We're just going to call this, let's call this 2023 full year forecast. And of course, we're going to use format, and we're going to tell Power BI that we want to format our forecast measure as dollars. And now let's go ahead and head into our data labels portion of our line chart customization. I'm going to go ahead and drop down to forecast. I'm going to turn off my data labels there. And for my forecast marker, I'm going to tell Power BI that I want that to be visualized with my DIN font. I want to use a custom label, and I'll just drop my forecast label in there. And now you can see my pretty little label here for my full year 2023 forecast. And now that we have done that, let's go ahead and just hide this rough forecast page, and let's go ahead and create some forecast visuals. And for our forecast visuals, I am actually going to copy and paste the forecast that we already made. But since this is already labeled, we don't need to have our legend say forecast and forecast marker. These two labels probably aren't going to make a whole lot of sense to somebody who's looking at our infographic. So let's just go ahead and turn off our legend. And I'm also going to turn off my titles on my charts, especially for the months. I don't need to tell somebody that these are months. Most anybody who's going to look at this are going to know, oh, hey, those are months. Pretty easy stuff, right? Let's go ahead and increase the fonts a little bit. Going to make sure that my responsive is turned off. Could save me some headaches later on. And let's go ahead and drop down our y-axis, and I'm going to turn off the titles there, make sure that everything is formatted with my DIN. You'll notice that my y-axis is not formatted as dollars. Let's go ahead and fix that by making sure that our forecast measure, which makes up this lighter blue line, is formatted correctly. That looks good to me. And now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drag this up here, and I'm going to copy and paste it a number of times. And I'm going to go ahead and just add a store location filter to each of these. And the first visual, I'm going to filter this to just be Miami. The next one I'm going to filter to just Orlando. And the next one I'm going to filter to just Tampa. And you can see that all my numbers here are different because we're showing now this forecast has been updated and it's filtering correctly so that it's a very rough forecast for each of my 3 unique stores. Now, one thing that I also want to check and see here if I can do is let's go ahead and play with what I'm doing is I'm playing with my offset to see if I can keep the marker from overlapping so much with the actual line and the marker. This is another new feature with Power BI that I'm just kind of playing with here. Seems to be working okay, though. You'll notice that as I'm clicking this offset, my label is actually dropping down. And then you have the ability to turn on these leader lines, which, you know, personally, I don't really mind it. Let's go ahead and try to offset these as well. Oops, 1 second. I forgot that I need to change both of these to under. There we go. Now I'll turn on my leader lines, and those are done. The next thing that I want to do here real fast is I want to create another matrix visual here, this time using my store locations. And I'm gonna, again, make sure that this is a matrix. I almost always click on table by accident and then have to switch it over to matrix, but no big deal. Let's go ahead and pop over here and grab our day name short. Let's go ahead and expand all of these fields so that the table looks something like this. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this says day and that this says store. And I'm going to go ahead and drop my total sales in here. And now let's go ahead and grab our month name short. We'll drag and drop that right there. And what we're trying to do here is we're going to create another matrix that sort of visually captures the fact that our sales are really starting to heat up around April, May, or June. So let's just go ahead and head over to our row header section. And I'm going to drop down my options, and I'm going to push these day names out past our store names by flipping off this stepped layout toggle. So you'll notice that now my days are kind of in their own column alongside my stores. I'm also going to turn off my banded row colors. I'm going to make sure that all of this is set for DIN, my favorite font. Let's go ahead and also turn off our column subtotals. I'm going to go to my grid settings and get rid of these blue outlines that I'm not a huge fan of. Let's open up our borders. Let's go ahead and just change that border color to white. Now you'll notice that I've got this white and gray alternating banding behind my colors. Just going to go to my values. For alternate background color, that's where that little gray band is coming from. Let's go ahead and just make that white as well. Now I'm going to make sure that all of my values here are set to DIN. Doesn't really matter as much what font size you pick if you decide that you just want to hide the text values entirely. But let's go ahead and also open back up our grid settings, and let's add a little bit of additional padding here, because ultimately for Miami, Orlando, and Tampa, I'm going to try to line up these line charts with their corresponding store locations in the matrix here. So let's go ahead and increase the padding like so. And let's go ahead and open up our cell elements, and let's add our colors. And the ultimate effect that I'm going for is something more or less like this. Might even have a little bit more space to get away with here. Let's go ahead and see if I can increase my padding just once more. Okay, that might be about as good as I'm going to be able to make it. Again, don't get too hung up on the the actual cosmetics or the formatting just yet, because we're going to have to still blow a lot of this stuff up once we get to actually building out our layout for our infographic. But for now, I'm at least trying to draw attention to the fact that compared to January, February, and March, April, May, and June are showing much darker regions, indicating that total sales are starting to really take off and are playing a very big role on the remainder of our forecast here.